Hi, I'm Dr. Carmen Imes, Associate Professor of Old Testament at Biola University. Welcome back for another Torah Tuesday. We are working our way through the book of Exodus, and more specifically, we are in Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments, and today we're talking about the Sabbath command. I'm going to begin by reading from my translation of the Hebrew. Remember the Sabbath day by setting it apart. 6 days you shall serve and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath belonging to Yahweh your God. You must not do any work, you, nor your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your draft animal, or your foreigner who is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. For this reason, Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart. All right, so this is the first of 2 positive commands in the 10 Commandments. This one, along with honor your parents, are the positive ones. It is a positive command because it's asking them to set apart the seventh day. It's supposed to be different from other days. There's supposed to be a rhythm in Jewish life, 6 days of work followed by a day of no work. So embedded within that positive command to set apart the seventh day is a negative command or a prohibition of working. The word seventh sounds like the word Sabbath, so that's something you can't see reading along in English. Seventh is Shavi'i and Sabbath is Shabbat, so it has the same first 2 main consonants. I want to address a few common misunderstandings about this command. First of all, people often talk about the Sabbath command. People today, and here I'm thinking mainly of Christians today, talk about the Sabbath command as the one that Christians are free to disregard. So I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you have a job interview for a new job. Your new employer has just offered you the job, and he or she is going over the benefits of your position. And they say, you're going to be expected to work 40 hours a week, and we need you here on site at least 8 hours each day for 5 days in a row. But then we're going to give you 2 days off, and we have committed not to contacting you over the weekend to ask you to do anything. So you're not responsible to check your email, and you're not responsible to respond to any inquiries or to check on projects that will be waiting for you when you come back on Monday morning. And I want you to imagine with me that you respond to that by saying, oh, no, that's not the kind of job I'm looking for. I want to be on the clock 24/7. You can count on me to work all weekend long. I'm going to keep my eye on things. I don't need time off. Okay, nobody goes into a job interview asking for less time off. So why would we respond to God's gracious invitation of a day off every week in which work is not expected or required? Why would we respond to that by saying, no thanks, I want to keep working all the time? That just doesn't make any sense. The Sabbath command is not a ball and chain. It's not by definition legalistic, although it could be treated legalistically. Someone could respond legalistically to it. This command is an invitation to relief from the drudgery of a schedule that's same with no break. Even if you like your work, the Sabbath command offers an invitation to regularly remind yourself that the world does not depend on you and your labor, but that you can sit back and trust God as your provider. I've noticed, too, that those who don't want to take a Sabbath tend to require those around them to keep working on the Sabbath as well. So this command is specifically addressed to heads of households. It refers to the various members of the household from the perspective of addressing the head of household, a male head of household, probably including his wife, because it talks about their children, their servants, their draft animals, the foreigners who live among them, anyone who's under their authority or under their control. Those are the ones who are supposed to be given a day off. So this command restrains the power of the boss on behalf of every member of Israelite society, even the animals. Its invitation to rest is addressed to everyone. Everyone gets a day of rest. Now, you might have been troubled by this mention of servants, or in some translations, slaves, male and female slaves. It's important to note that these relationships, these employment relationships, are governed by many of the other laws that are still to come in the book of Exodus, especially chapter 21, verses 2 through 11, that regulate the practice of indentured servitude. In large part, that institution, the possibility of working for someone to pay off a debt, is a safety net to prevent people from falling into dire poverty. I'm going to place a couple of resources for you in the description below. One is a link to a lecture that I gave on slavery in the Old Testament, and the other is a link to a podcast interview with Sean McDowell, where he and I talk about slavery in the Old Testament. So if you're struggling with why is this in the Bible, or how are we supposed to understand this, those are resources that will go into a lot more depth on this question. But for now, it's just good to note that no one here is being exploited under God's command. God is not commanding them to take slaves. He's actually regulating the employer-employee relationship to make sure that exploitation is not taking place. I love how this passage refers to your foreigners. There's a sense of belonging for the foreigners who live among the Israelites in their community, and those who have attached themselves to Israelite families for long-term employment are also supposed to be given a day off. They're not second-class citizens in the sense that the day of rest does not apply to them. So both of these categories of people, vulnerable people, the servants and the foreigners who live among you, are dependent on the faithful implementation of hospitable business practices regulated by Yahweh. Now, this does not mean that no one in ancient Israel was ever mistreated. Of course, people disobeyed God's commands, but God put these commands in place as guardrails for the greed of landowners so that they would not exploit those under their care. This command, this rhythm of 6 days of work and 1 day of rest, is modeled after creation. So Genesis 1, the account of creation, provides a kind of liturgical model or a pattern that's supposed to be implemented by humans so that we pattern our work week after God's work week. It's really fascinating to flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 15, and see that the motivation in that iteration of the Ten Commandments is different. So here, they're at Mount Sinai. Yahweh is directly declaring the Ten Commandments to his people. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, Moses is preaching to the people one last time before he dies and they enter the promised land. And he restates the Ten Commandments as part of his sermon. And in that restatement, he issues a different motivation for why they should keep the Sabbath command. In Deuteronomy, the motivation is that you were slaves in Egypt, but I set you free from there. So remember that and don't continue to live as though you are slaves. I'm not that kind of master. I'm not exacting work from you 7 days a week. I'm offering you a day off. So don't live like you're enslaved. It's really fascinating because in Deuteronomy, Moses is addressing the generation that was born in the wilderness that had not actually been enslaved in Egypt. But he wants them to own that story as their own history, their own story, that when God set the Israelites free from slavery in Egypt, he set future generations free from that as well. He wants them to practice Sabbath as a way of remembering what kind of master he is and what kind of life he wants them to be able to have. Now, inevitably, many of you watching this are waiting to hear me talk about which day of the week Christians ought to celebrate Sabbath on, whether it's Saturday or Sunday. Ancient Israel set aside the seventh day, which on their calendar was Saturday, as their day of rest. Christians, most Christians through history since the time of the New Testament have set aside Sunday as the day of rest and the day of gathering for worship. So there are different communities that handle this differently. So Seventh-day Adventists are advocating for the celebration of the Sabbath on Saturday, and they take very seriously this command and the timing of this command. Messianic believers also often celebrate a day of rest on Saturday, whereas most Christians celebrate it on Sunday. I am far less concerned which day you take as your Sabbath day or which day your community honors as a Sabbath, and I'm far more concerned that you actually practice Sabbath, that you actually set aside a day every week to say, I am going to stop working because I am not a slave, and today I'm trusting God for the provision that He's given and will continue to give, and I'm sitting back to enjoy the provision that He's made for me and for my family and for my community. And I'm going to take the time to rest. I'm going to do things that are life-giving for me, for my family. I'm going to spend time with people. I'm going to get off the hamster wheel, step out of the rat race, and just bask in God's great and gracious provision. Sabbath is a beautiful thing because it restores our availability to God and to others. It takes our eyes off of our to-do list for a day, and we need that psychologically, physically. It's so healthy for us to take a day to unplug. So I would encourage you this week, if you don't already practice Sabbath, to begin thinking of ways that you can unplug for that day. It probably will mean not checking email, maybe even turning your phone on silent for the day so that you're not distracted by notifications and that beckoning back to the to-do list or back to work. If you're a student, it means planning ahead and getting your homework done in advance so that you can truly enjoy a day off. So that's my invitation to you, to actually take Sabbath seriously and to try it out. If you can't start with a whole day, start with part of a day that you set aside for rest and for worship and for fellowship with others, and see what a gift it is. Have a great week.